Thank you. I couldn't have asked for a better and, quite frankly, more appropriate way to set the stage. I'll start with a confession. In this short time that I'll share with you, it will probably be the case that I'll get more from this conference than you'll get from my remarks. Just having heard the speakers that have preceded me and the spirit in this room, it's very powerful, and you are to be commended for this gathering and what I know will come from it. Let me explain to you a little bit about what the Beltline is, and then we'll talk about the link between this particular project and this notion of community transformation. The Beltline was conceived by a graduate student at Georgia Tech some 20 some odd years ago, just about, who looked at a way to repurpose the abandoned railroad corridors that surround this city. And those of you who know Atlanta's history, it was founded as a stop on the railroad. And so there are abandoned railroad corridors that encircle the city, and where there are, quite frankly, some of the most underutilized properties in the region. And so he looked at, traced those parcels along on a map and said, there's a way to repurpose this and to bring these abandoned areas of the city back to life by connecting them, a 22-mile loop of trails, parks, and transit. And so it is, as it stands today, perhaps the most comprehensive urban revitalization project in the nation, quite frankly, as we look to add thousands of acres of parkland, over 40 miles of trails, and also transit to complement that loop as well. It has already transformed some of the neighborhoods on the east side as the project has been being built out, and we expect that process to continue as the project unfolds. As far as the organization that I am charged with leading, the Atlanta Beltline Partnership has three main goals. One is to enable that project. The public sector funds that are pouring into that project are not enough to build it. And so we enable that project by reaching out to the philanthropic institutions, the corporations, and soliciting donations from them, so far to the tune of about $50 million. And that amount will grow as the project unfolds. But we enable the project by fundraising from the philanthropic community and the private sector. And then we engage the users, so the folks that are coming out and using the project as it exists currently, the trails and the parks. We look to engage them by continuing to build enthusiasm and linking them to the project and finding activities and programs that draw them out and help them utilize what is already becoming a huge social benefit as far as the city of Atlanta is concerned. And then the last one that I want to spend the most time talking about with you today is empower. So we enable the project, we engage the users, and then we empower the residents of those neighborhoods. The Beltline travels through 45 neighborhoods. And the notion is that our duty is to make sure that the residents of those communities are best positioned to benefit from what the Beltline can mean to their communities. And so let's focus there for a moment. I think it's also important to establish the fact that the Beltline travels through some of the richest neighborhoods in the city of Atlanta, and quite frankly, some of the poorest. And so the juxtaposition, that viewpoint that Dr. Lee so eloquently pointed out, you have some neighborhoods where the conversation is about, what car to buy the 16-year-old, or what private school to attend, or what foreign country to plan the family vacation in. In other neighborhoods, the conversation is about how long are we going to be able to stay in this house, and will I be able to get to school safely, and is the threat of gang violence or drug-related violence going to take another one of our children? And so because of the scope, the geographic scope of the project, the social scope of the project is also significantly large. And so where we are so far, we've built a trail, a project on the East Side Trail, and it goes through neighborhoods like Inman Park and Reynoldstown, Virginia Highlands, Ponce Highlands. And it was very much a situation where there was this pent up demand in this particular part of town for development and growth. And almost as the Beltline was being built, you saw new townhomes and new apartments and new condominiums and lots of new development, merchants, commercial businesses moving in as well. So it was as though the waters were pressing against the floodgates, and we opened the floodgates, and they came. As we enter into some of the communities on the southwest part of town, we know the experience will be different. So whereas folks on certain parts of town are clamoring, when is the Beltline coming to my neighborhood? How close am I going to be? I'm ready for what the Beltline will bring. In some neighborhoods, there's a little bit of trepidation, quite frankly, because you're talking about neighborhoods that have experienced generations of underinvestment. Neighborhoods that have lived through decades of broken promises, neighborhoods whose hope was pinned on civic and political leaders coming in and ushering in that long-awaited age of redevelopment and new growth, and it never happened. And so now that the construction fences and the steam shovels are moving into Southwest Atlanta, there's a cautious optimism because one is, are they going to deliver what they said they would? And then two, it's, am I going to be able to stay here if they do? Right? And so you're talking about an area of town where the population has decreased by about a third over the past 8 to 10 years. So people have moved out largely because of the housing crisis that fell on the city and gripped the city of Atlanta much more in a much more striking way than it did in other cities across the nation. So folks have already been forced out of their homes that perhaps in some cases have been in their family for generations. And so you have these vacant houses and these undervalued parcels, and as you pump in this investment that surrounds this infrastructure project, there's a question of what that neighborhood will look like once the project is done, if you see where I'm coming from. And so the challenge is how to make this particular project, which is in many instances a once-in-a-lifetime type of investment, how do you use this project as a vehicle for community transformation? The analogy I'll draw, and I know you'll be able to appreciate it, just because you construct a building and you call it a church, it doesn't mean that any souls are being saved on the inside of that institution. And so there are instances in the Bible where there were some very specific instructions on how to construct the temple. But you all know, and speakers have already attested to the fact that it's what goes on inside and the servant leadership that the leaders of those congregations demonstrate and what they are able to engender amongst their congregation. That's what makes the difference. And so as we're building this project and all the numbers are in place, the West Side Trail will be a much more expensive project than the East Side Trail. The amenities that are built into the project are much more extensive than what was built on the East Side Trail. The civic and community leaders are there with their contributions and their involvement, and they're engaged, as are the elected officials. But we know that there are steps that we have to take if the residents of those communities are going to be able to truly benefit from the investment that's taking place. And so as we have this conversation about community transformation, in this evolved state that we are in, I'm a big fan of Dr. Lowry's and this notion of him struggling with the current issues that we face. I think a lot of times, folks, and I'm not qualified to even enter in this realm, given who's in the room, but I think a lot of folks underestimate the devil, to be quite frank, and hatred can evolve and change and manifests itself in the way that it's going to be most effective for the current time. And so in Dr. Lowry's day, hatred wore hoods and had dogs and fire hoses, and you knew very clearly where the other side stood. And it made it not easy, But the leaders that stood against that hatred, everybody knew where the battle lines were drawn. Hatred today is decentralized. It's institutionalized. And instead of wearing a hood, it may have a badge. It may have a lofty title. It may have a corporation at its back. So since hatred is decentralized and the battle lines are no longer clearly drawn, it takes decentralized leadership. So it's hard to point to one or two or three or four folks who are going to lead us out of this, quite frankly. It takes a group like this, where you are empowering leaders and equipping leaders to go out into the community and have these conversations and energize their congregations. I can't do it by myself. I need Dr. Lee's involvement on that board. She needs to be able to lean on you all. I need to have folks, positioned strategically. Harriet Tubman gets a lot of credit for the Underground Railroad, but it never would have happened if she didn't have the network of safe houses that were weaved. So I digress. So the notion is, if we are to be successful at capitalizing on this infrastructure project and what it can mean for the communities that it's traveling through, it can be the hope that actually does produce results and bring forth a catalytic change that improves these folks' lives, connecting them to jobs, connecting them to economic opportunities, ushering in additional students to the school system population and improving those schools that have long since been forgotten and underperforming. It can be all of that, or it can just usher in the wave of folks that move them out. And it's a thank you very much for babysitting this historic community for the past 40 years. I'll take your house now. And that's what we have to prepare ourselves to take part in. And I cannot have that conversation as plainly as I'm having it with you right now in circles where there are folks charged with the leadership of this project who don't agree with everything I just said. And so I'll close with this. Two things that I would lay out, two concepts to consider. One is we have to be at the table. And I mean that in the most, I know it's cliche, but there are underutilized opportunities for us to be involved in these decisions. In many instances, the public forums, the committee rooms at the Capitol and at City Hall are empty, and there are very few, if any, well-articulated expressions of the concerns of the types of communities that we're talking about. And so we have to seize opportunities to be at the table. I'm thankful for the position I have, and I take it very seriously, but I understand that somebody else gave it to me. So now that I have it, I have to use it to the best of my ability. I feel like that's my responsibility. But we have to make sure that we find opportunities to be at the table and express the interests of our community in the language that others will understand. And secondly, we have to take on a sense of ownership. It's past due, this investment that's happening on the southwest side of town and in these underprivileged and underserved neighborhoods throughout the city of Atlanta. It's overdue, and we deserve it. We have it coming to us, but we also have to understand that it was given to us by someone else, and so we have to seize opportunities for ownership. So by that I mean, the Beltline is coming. The decisions have been made to make this investment. And it will bring new levels of activity, a new stream of people. And so let's invest in entrepreneurial ventures that capitalize on the economic energy that type of project can produce. And let's start to invest in those types of opportunities so that we can begin to capture the resources that we need to start to determine our own fate, and not to have to wait for the next big investment. Let's start investing in the types of activities and placing our energy, channeling our energy in ownership opportunities, wealth building opportunities. And in many cases, the church can be the center of that type of activity. And quite frankly, in many of these neighborhoods, there is no other institution there to do this kind of work. So those are the two things that I'll close with. Let's be at the table, one, and then let's capitalize on these opportunities in a way that harnesses the power that these infrastructure projects can bring to really begin to transform our communities. Thank you for allowing me to be here with you today. I really appreciate the opportunity.